Well, crisis averted, right?
Yeah, huge crisis. I mean, considering the state of the world, imagine if we added this to the whole
I know,
plate.
exactly. It might just tip things over to complete anarchy, but the bad kind of anarchy, not
Yeah,
the
yeah.
self rule. We all work together to be responsible for our own. Anyway, I totally forgot. Hold on. Right, this was meant to be a vacation for you. This is the
Oh,
best I can do.
all
I don't have
right.
any. I don't have any little umbrellas for my drinks, and I also ran out of ice. So,
Hey,
uh,
the festive, it is very islandy.
it's yeah,
Yeah,
the best I could do.
yeah, I appreciate it. I mean, that's
But I'll,
that's the
I'll
most an American has done for a Canadian in at least 3 months.
yes,
Yeah.
I yes, I feel like we should start this off with an apology. I apologize on behalf of uh, myself, and I feel like if I apologize on behalf of anybody else, I might end up in a gulag. So that's, I mean, it's probably a step up from a concentration camp. This is starting off good. Tell you what, um,
Dark.
dark. Thanks. We are living in the stupidest of times. Um,
Not gonna argue with you there, because I honestly can't think of a facet of life, from like professional to political to stability to kind of the state of the world in general where things are stable, right? Like I
yeah,
feel like
yeah,
I have never like I lived through the fall of communism, and like I lived in Africa, I lived in Eastern Europe, I lived all over the place, right? And in what's been labeled as very unstable times in history, I can tell you that I have never felt as unstable, I've never felt instability in the world around me as I have in the last, whatever, 3.5 months, whatever it's been. I don't
right.
know. It feels like it's been 17 years, but
It's been about 17 years. Yeah,
yeah.
it's yeah,
But
yeah.
you
It's
know, it's nice to see, like, after tens of years of Canadians apologizing, like to kind of see Americans apologizing once in a while is very refreshing.
yeah,
Like
and like I said, on behalf of me, and that's about all I can give you. Yeah, it is. Um, like I've talked about this with a couple of other people when we've done recordings like this. On the one hand, I think that the proper reaction to this is relatively quick, but not sudden resistance.
right.
And I think for the long term health and well being of this country, the country we're connected to by imaginary borders, um, and the world at large, taking a opposite approach, a measured um, but persistent approach to stopping the ridiculousness,
Oh, I thought
stopping.
you were going to say the flow of fentanyl.
No, no, no. We
No.
need to increase that. And when I'm president, um, the Rose Garden is just it's out. Fentanyl lab is in.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Um,
I,
it's
I
like
need to
we need to
visit you
start
again.
manufacturing in America.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we're doing our job with the 1.5% of all fentanyl flowing into the States.
Mm-hmm.
We take full responsibility, and like we're trying hard
Yeah.
to maintain that in single digits. But
Yeah.
it's what it is. That's how much it is according to stats. But we need to
Yeah.
increase
Just
our
just that.
border.
Yeah. It's yeah. I mean, getting into it a little bit. It's both the supply and the demand need to be addressed, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I'm sure we're demanding more than we're supplying. I mean, we're Canadian, and it's cold here
Right.
for
Yeah.
most of the year, so we
Hey,
need this shit.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I grew up in Alaska, so it's like,
Oh,
the stat used to be like, I don't know if it's still true, but um, Alaskans consume more ice cream per capita than any other state, and its peak is in the coldest of the winter.
oh, so
Um,
like ice cream or like ice
no,
cream?
actual ice cream,
Okay.
and I'm just wondering the extent to which fentanyl has like become the new top.
Okay.
Um, just because it's
Interesting.
so popular with millennials. I don't know. Um,
I don't know, I've seen somewhere on TV that it's like 20% like stronger than like heroin or something like that, which is like, I mean,
uh,
that if if there's any sentence that would like make me not try a drug, that would be it,
right,
you know?
right, yeah.
Yeah,
Hey, heroin's pretty addictive, but fentanyl,
yeah,
good luck getting off that.
yeah,
Yeah, and that's what I meant about like addressing the supply and the demand. Like we basically tell people to pull themselves up by their bootstraps in this country for pretty much everything, and to do so while um, your brain is being pummeled with the insistence that addiction brings. Um, like it's just ridiculous to expect anyone to be like, yeah, just cut it out, man. Just
yeah.
stop.
I mean, I've talked to somebody who's in the sort of social kind of services space recently, and like they were saying that, like all the traditional ways of like, sending somebody to rehab and whatever don't work with these new drugs. Like
Yeah,
people just don't get off these. It's not a thing where like you spend a month away from them and all of a sudden you're like, yeah, good, let's do this, right?
right.
It's like they're so addictive at a level that it doesn't work anymore. So people are trying really hard to figure out what is the way out, right? Like, how can we
Yeah,
make people want to get out both mentally and physiologically, right? Because I think they're so interconnected, And I mean, by the way, I'm not an expert. I don't know why we're talking about this,
oh yeah,
but yeah,
it's relevant to the times.
yeah,
It's
that's
Yeah, but it's like I think about the demand side of things and like how do we? Here we go, segue. I know you're not supposed to say segue out loud, but I do it anyway. Um, how do we design systems in such a way to diminish the initial demand? Like what external pressures are there that could be addressed to ensure or reduce the likelihood that someone's going to try it the first time? You know,
that's a loaded question.
thank you.
Um, so,
Fix it. Fix it,
yeah,
Cornelius,
so I don't. Again,
or at least 1.5% of it.
I don't believe that like people can design systems number one. Like I think we can sort of
Ooh,
understand them. I
that's a good
think
line.
that we can uh you know try to sort of nudge them a little bit one way or another, right? Like which we can try to kind of create what most of the time amounts to micro interventions within systems, and then based on how the system reacts, we can sort of kind of fine tune that intervention for the second time around and the third time around, eventually kind of get to a point where like the system might have a different outcome, right? Like
Mm,
overall, from the perspective of which from which you're looking at the system, obviously, right? And, ideally, you'd want that outcome to be a change for more than your perspective. You want it to be like a change of outcome from the perspective of the people who are negatively affected by the system, right? Because I'm assuming there's a reason why we want to kind of change that system behavior. But
right.
you know, in terms of how to do it, like again, I think this is trial and error, right? This is not, like again, you're familiar with sort of my thoughts about like sort of abductive reasoning, right? Like
Hmm.
being able to kind of take a shot in the dark, see what happens, like throw something on the wall, and if it sticks, try to throw something bigger on the wall and see if that sticks. And if it doesn't, change the stuff that like change the composition of the stuff you're throwing, right? And it's
Hmm.
it's not a very logical, like I'm gonna go from point A to point B to point C to point D, and sort of in a very deductive way, or like you can use logic in a lot of these. Like these are too much of a complex endeavor to kind of like fully understand. So you have to try, but sorry, to fully redesign or design. But I think we can try to understand them. We can try to understand facets of systems that and how they behave as well, right? And we can try to affect that behavior for certain actors into the system. But that's the extent that, I know systems thinking is big right now, and everybody's is a systems thinker, and everybody loves complexity, right? But like how many times have we all been able to change the outcome or the behavior of these systems? Not super often, right? We
Hmm.
I think the best we can say is we made other people understand kind of how the system behaves. We may have highlighted some of the ways in which the system does harm, and to certain actors in the system that were not in the intended sort of primary actors or secondary actors, right? And
Hmm.
and I think that is a positive outcome, right, in on itself. Now, modifying the behavior of a system, that's harder, right? It's what is your definition of a system? If you're talking about like the service ecosystem of an organization, I feel like, yeah, that is small enough of a footprint that you can possibly affect it in a way, positive or negative, but you can change things, right?
Hmm.
But if we're talking about like the typical, systemic change at, you know, humanity or planetary level, right? It takes a lot of people and years and trial and error and acceptance and policy change and politics, and like the system is so big and so interconnected that we shouldn't lie to ourselves to say, you know what, like, yeah, parachute me in the middle of Africa and I will fix the water crisis. Like
Right.
that kind of mentality, which, frankly, I've had when I was like 18, right? Like I was like, yeah, like I am, the white knight, right? Like that, you know, I learned recently about sort of that like kind of hero, victim, and like I don't know, whatever the triangle. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but
Mm.
I think all of us in our career have been taken, especially early on in our careers, we've taken those perspectives, right? And I feel like I've had those perspectives when I was younger. I think I understand more of the world now, and I think I'm. Some people would say maybe jaded, but I would say more realistic in terms of how the world works, right? And how much good and how much bad is in it, right? And like people want to be optimistic and kind of take the good with the bad, right? I just
Hmm.
want to make sure that when people say take the good in the bad, they don't just think about the good.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. There were a couple things that popped to mind when you were explaining that. I think that one of the things that can make for a successful design, I'll be a little high level for a second. What can make for a successful design outcome is you marked it as like within an organization because it's small footprint, right?
Yeah.
And within that system, and maybe I'm saying this with a lowercase a. It's an authoritarian system.
Yes.
There's someone at the top who says, "Okay, new direction, do it, everybody." And it doesn't mean that all of a sudden, obviously, it's going to start working, but you know, in the sort of more idealized path, people start working toward that new future state, right? I know you know this. I'm just kind of building up to something. Um, the and I think that's where those systems where we can have those successes and say, hey, we helped this company make an extra 10 million annual recurring revenue because of our parachuting in and saving the day. Um, But I think within that, we still aren't necessarily trying not to speak for everyone, so I'll just speak for me. I'm not necessarily then saying, all right, we've identified a new future state. We are, let's say we stick around and hey, we're 63% of the way to this new future state. Our future state is becoming our current state. This is great. We don't then sit around and say, all right, sorry, I don't then sit around and say, all right, how is this new future state harming?
Right.
Right. It's, hey, we figured out the future state from, like you're saying, a perspective
Yeah.
of increased profit, reduce risk, lower costs, whatever
Yeah.
capitalistic lens is being applied or focus. And then beyond that, it's okay, you were successful from this perspective, but were you successful from these other perspectives? And I don't. Now, this one I'll say we don't typically then step back and say, all right, what did we mess up
Right.
because of these changes, right? And so I think this is probably where you're going with like people don't really design systems
Yeah, and
in a way, or correct me if I'm wrong, but
no, you're absolutely correct. But it's also like I think I think we can go back to sort of to the definition of what it's like to design nowadays, right?
mm,
And I kind of think of like, asking questions through design being like orders of magnitude better for the world than answering questions through design, right? So I
mm,
look at sort of service design or systemic service design as a design subdiscipline where we ask questions through design, right? Like we don't provide the solution. We map out the current state, we map out the future state, we try to figure out these interventions, right? And it's all almost like hypothesis testing, right? And it's almost like,
mm,
we're trying to see if we can nudge behavior a certain way or another while understanding, hopefully, the possible side effects and the harm that we're creating, right? And we don't have the answer. We're asking those questions through our design deliverables, and sometimes it works out really well, and sometimes it's a complete flop, right? As a project, as an endeavor, as whatever. Whereas I feel like when we're talking about product design, right, like that's where we're answering questions through design, right? Like we're providing a solution to a design problem that's well formulated and like
hopefully,
kind of very tangible, right? And I've had zero interest for that kind of work for probably close to 10 years now, right? Like
yeah,
for most of the time that I've known you, for sure, right? And it was it's only relatively recently that I've started articulating that a little bit, like trying to understand what do I mean by designing, right? And just this concept of like asking questions through design versus answering questions through design.
mm-hmm.
And I think it's wherever you're, because I feel like when you're beginning your career, you're all about like I want to wireframe and prototype and create design
Right,
systems
right,
and kind of go swimming in Figma 24/7, right? And that is and I've been there and I've enjoyed that part of my career early on, right? And I've
mm-hmm.
enjoyed managing kind of practices that really lived in that environment. But when we're talking about you know, mature, however mature I am, right? Mature me as a practitioner, right? Or more mature than I was 10, 15, 20 years ago. Uh, I've shifted my lens about like what is my role, right? What is the role of me in projects, of my practice, of the projects that I tend to sort of kind of navigate towards and gravitate towards, and I feel like it's been making me feel more fulfilled as a designer, right? Than
Mm-hmm.
I've ever been as this sort of mobile first design system, Figmaism bullshit that's happening right now is taking
Right.
over the design world.
Yeah, I think yeah, this has been on my mind a lot lately. I think to your point about early in the career, it is good and appropriate that designers earlier in their career are given uh, small scope, low risk, low impact things to work on, right? It's like you can be successful by doing these wireframes because I gave you a very small box to work in. And you're probably, hopefully, you won't screw that up. And if you don't, then I may give you a bigger box, right? Um, and I think that that's like looking back over the course of my career, it's definitely been um, one of trading a box for a bigger box to the point now where it's still a box, but the sides are transparent and the corners are all wobbly. It's a terrible metaphor, but I'm going with it anyway. Uh,
But it's your
it's an
box.
it's an
It's a
amorphous blob of a box,
yeah.
and I don't mind it so much. But yeah, it's
But you get
I
to choose
think
the box now a little bit more
yeah,
than you used
yeah, I
to.
think so. Yeah, yeah, and even to the point where I've had I think where I get the most enjoyment out of it and most feeling like I'm helping, which has become more and more important to me. It's always been important, but it has outpaced. I mean, I still want to get paid, but it has outpaced the importance of money that I want to be able to help, or have that feeling of having had help. Hmm. Um, but like getting into projects that are really more generative, like the asking questions side of things, like a project a couple years ago, people have meetings, go find out about that. It's not like super exciting, but it ended up being interesting. It was a bit of a too wide of a scope, I think, to start with, but I mean, it was at least something to scope down to. But and another one that was like interviewing uh, hospital CEOs and heads of medicine and heads of nursing, trying to understand like what challenges they face and what they do to address them with running their departments, and not really having a lens beyond that, right? Just we're just seeing what's out there, and but I do think it, based off of what you're describing, it may still be in. I don't know. Maybe I'm. Tell me if I'm putting words in your mouth. It, it may still be activity in search of some product design, right?
Not
In search of defining some problems to solution, which is not
yeah, like
bad,
you
but
still want to go back down in scale, right? Like once you've identified some ways in which you can nudge things at a service or
mm-hmm,
system level, right? Like you still need to figure out like how to make that permanent, right? Like, or semi-permanent, whatever permanence is, right? But I feel like you do need to get there. However, how we get there now, like in modern service design, right? Like the way I mean, I tend to like I call it modern. I don't know, maybe it's a terrible kind of misnomer, but I like to think of like multidisciplinary, like kind of participatory multidisciplinary activities where, like you said, you talk to people who run hospitals and people who are like healthcare workers and that kind of stuff, right? I feel like it's and you talk to them not from like necessarily I'm here to research you or to research what you're doing. Is I'm just here to observe your world, right?
yeah,
I'm here to
yeah,
encounter your world, right? And I like that word a lot better, right? Like I'm here to have an encounter with your world, right?
yeah,
And you're just in it and you can choose to engage with me or you can choose to ignore me, right? Like, I don't want it to be an interview. I don't want it to be a contextual inquiry. It can
yeah, yeah.
be whatever you want it to be, but I'm gonna gain a perspective of what's happening and it's going to be my perspective, right? And I'm going to try to validate that perspective against what I'm seeing and what you're possibly saying. But
Mm-hmm.
it's less it's less formulaic and it's less like with this lens of like I'm the designer and you're the kind of exotic bird
Yeah,
that
you're
I'm
my
about
subject.
to. Exactly. Yes.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
this idea of multidisciplinary, participatory, collaborative, right? Like, we've all hopefully realized by now that, it's not, we don't own the user, the customer, internal, external, primary, secondary, tertiary. We don't own any of that. We may put people in boxes that way, like you say, right?
hmm
But uh, what we're trying to do is work together with everybody to reach a better end state, right? Like that's the job of a designer. I
yeah,
choose to do that job by asking questions through my design activities, right? And that annoys some people, honestly, right? Like people go like,
yeah.
I need
I
I
just
need
wanted answers.
sprints.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
need,
I need
the
tickets.
five, design thinking boxes. I want to like split those out nicely in a Miro board, and like I want to
hmm
see dates. I want to see, A to B to C to D, and that kind of stuff. And that's just not what I do anymore. And I used to, and it made sense with a very limited understanding of design that I had 25 years ago. Is it makes zero sense right now, right? Like
Yeah,
absolutely no sense right now to do design that way, especially in complex environments, right? Like if you're building a shopping cart, yeah, sure, like buy a design system, build a design system, reuse every pattern in the world, and
yeah, yeah.
and so on, right?
It's
But
been tested. It's been solved. Like, just
exactly.
go
But
for it. Yeah,
but if you're trying to figure out like how to provide healthcare on the moon, right? That's a whole different level of complexity and familiarity, right? Because it's not a familiar environment. It's not a familiar, right? So it's like when people
hmm
ask me to help with that kind of shit, right? It's like, well, I'm gonna need some time to figure out what what are we talking about here, right? Because I mean, I've read sci-fi, I love sci-fi, but there's, you know, to
right.
kind of go from that to what is reality, who are the people involved, what do they care about, right? How can they get harmed? And again, like harm in some of these contexts is, like you're talking about healthcare, right? So like this is a healthcare example
Yeah,
that I have in mind, right? It's like harm is very harmful, right? It's not that somebody doesn't get their precious patent, right?
right, right. Yeah,
It's people will lose lives, families will be broken, right? Like things will explode potentially. So,
right.
we're talking a whole different level. So that's why I think, we need to reframe how we do things and who we elevate in our community to kind of like tribe leaders, right? Because nowadays there's some crazy like like I see some takes out there and I'm just like, that you're not helping. Like this is not helpful.
Oh, yeah.
Like if you take
Yes,
any sort
absolutely.
of critical eye to what you're saying, you are not helping the design practice, the design community, the design perspective, design everything.
On that note, if you ever see me doing that, please feel free to publicly lambast me.
I
Or is that why you agreed to show up today so you could? You'd be like, Matthew, this is an intervention.
no, it's not. Like
This is the way you've
it's.
harmed design.
I mean, I don't do a lot of these, and I said no to a few because, like, you kind of watch an episode of a previous one, and you're like, yeah, that doesn't jive with, I also don't want I kind of feel like if that is the perspective that somebody subscribes to, and they have like 7 podcast episodes that kind of follows a perspective, and my perspective is going to be the divergent one, right? I'm like,
Mm.
and I don't like being outnumbered in a fight, you know.
Well, I'm on your side. I'm
Yeah,
on your
I
side.
know,
Yeah.
I know. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, I've done a little bit of research, right? Like I've been sick for the last like I have
Oh,
what
yeah, that's
feels
right.
like the
Yeah.
the 15th time this year, but it's only been 3 times. So the only thing that I can do when I'm sick is like listen to stuff and read stuff, right? Like I can't really focus very well. So I've been kind of listening to a few episodes of your podcast, and I was like, yeah, like these are people that have a real perspective on the world, right? And I'm not saying I
Yeah.
agree with every single minutia that was discussed, but like generally speaking, I like these are people that I would consider to be friends with. right,
Hmm.
in real life because of who they are and how they think, and sometimes how different they are from me as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I try to only have excellent humans on here so I can
Yeah,
learn
well,
from them to try and
that
be better.
that's gonna change drastically after
That's
this
right.
episode.
That's right.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you for playing
Yeah.
along on that one.
Yeah.
So, when going back, when or what was the trigger for you to start considering your role within your work so very differently than what you had done in the past?
I think it was, like I've like you said, you kind of move from box to box, or you move on a ladder, right? Like you're a junior, and then you're kind of like, for a few years, and then you're midstream, and then you're a senior, and then you're a team lead, and then you're a manager, right? And then you're a practice leader, right? Which is kind of like the as far as I've gone up the scale for a couple of big companies. And
Mm-hmm.
and then as I've sort of reached that level, I was like, right now, my only value is multiplying the impact of practitioners, like, kind of individual contributors and team leads and teams in general, but they're all working on that plane that I became sort of more and more this is like disassociated from. I don't know if that's the right word. Like, just it just felt to me like we're addressing problems that, while they matter to shareholder value and late stage capitalism, right? They
Mm-hmm.
didn't really necessarily move the needle when it comes to design, right? Like to the practice of design, to moving design to sort of the next level. And some people will argue that design has never been in a better place, right? And by all means, if that's what you believe, that's great, right? But I studied, so I went, like, I started my own company, and then I started working with people. And I remember specifically when people didn't know about design and about UX and about service design, right? So they would hire consultants like my studio, right, to kind of come in and help, like, come in and tell us, like, kind of, take the pulse of what's happening in the organization, right, and propose us some approaches, right. And sometimes the people will be like, yeah, no, we're not interested in this, right, like, thank you, great. Or sometimes they will be like, yeah, we want to work with you, this sounds like a fantastic way to move forward, right.
Mm-hmm.
when when that's changed, right? When all of a sudden you go to a company and says, well, I need a UX consultancy to come in and do design sprints, to work like over the next 6 weeks on 3 design sprints, to do interviews, and then to validate these hypotheses, like this, essentially a glorified A/B test, right? Or validate an opinion or validate a perspective of management, right? That's the
Mm-hmm.
time when I was like, oh crap, like that's not design. That doesn't feel like design to me. That doesn't feel like understanding the problem, understanding the context, and understanding the, like, surfacing hidden relationships between the humans that are making up this system, right, for lack of a better term. And I was like, but I want to do that more, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that was the shift, right? The shift was when people thought, but people outside design thought that they know enough about design from the bite-size, uh, I guess, sources that they consumed or they heard about, online and social media, mainstream media, right? Like, hey, this is what design is. Therefore, they all wanted, to do design thinking. They all wanted to do design sprints. They all, and that to me, like, they're just kind of like, I don't want to do any of that, right? I want to understand the problem. I don't want you to tell me, like you can give me a ballpark and say, like, come in, take a couple of weeks, take a couple of months to understand the problem. That's great, right? But you can
Mm-hmm.
tell me you're going to take the first 2 weeks to understand the problem, and then the next 2 weeks to, like, test the hypothesis, and then the next 2 weeks to prototype, like to ideate and prototype something, and then the next 2 weeks to test it, and then boom, after 10 weeks we will have the solution, right? Like, I do not
Right.
like that kind
Yeah.
of approach.
Because
And
you're
that's
gonna.
that's what made me shift, because I'm like, I need to move higher at the level of scale of what design is, in order to give my practice and my team the space to explore the context in which we're trying to solve problems, right? To
Hmm.
ask questions about problems.
And how have you found framing that for people to be like, do they, I mean, obviously, people are bringing you in, but it's like,
I mean,
how do you let the people who are like, hey, can you figure out a problem that fits into a 2 week chunk and solve for it, and say
well,
less so that, more so.
yeah, I use the 2 week, like I always tell people, like like if something is interesting, like this seems interesting enough from afar, right? I will come in
Mhm.
for 2 weeks and I will explore, right? I will encounter you,
Sure,
right?
yeah, right. But you're
And
doing like a discovery at that point.
yeah,
You're not
kind of like a discovery,
necessarily,
right?
yeah.
And then after those 2 weeks, right? Like if I decided like, nah, this is this is too low level, one, right? Or maybe
Hmm.
maybe it is too low level, but I actually like the space and I'm like, hey, you know what? Like I'll do some product design, right? Like I'm not like fully, disavowing all the things that I've done in my career now. It's like it's systems or bust, right? But if it looks interesting to me, and then also very important, the people are truly interested and they want to explore the space further, right? Because you're not going to solve anything in 2 weeks, right? Then we
Right.
can really, then I can maybe speak a little bit better into what I can do for them, right? Because but they have to have a mentality where the linear thinking aspect of design thinking doesn't won't help, right? And
Right.
usually the problems that we're solving are not product level problems, right? They're people, they're trying to get to understand a subset of their customers, or they're trying to get their own leadership to understand what it is that the organization's doing and where the gaps are, or right, like it's not always to improve something for the external customer. Sometimes a lot of this work is to surface something for the stakeholders, the high power stakeholders in the organization, in order
Yeah.
to nudge the organization to do the right thing, right?
Hmm.
And that's fun to me, right? Like that part is more fun than kind of doing 300 interviews and analyzing the data, and that's still fun once in a while, but that's not fun every day.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it made me think of a project a couple years ago where I was brought in to do a product strategy, for internal tooling. And it was like, okay, here's your product strategy, but it's not going to work. And it's because you have these infrastructure, not technical infrastructure, but like political infrastructure, organizational infrastructure issues that are going to make you fail.
Right.
And you didn't hire me to find those things, but in the course of talking to people about what's troubling them, interviews, it just became clear that you know people weren't really working together, and that was the biggest the biggest problem. I mean, we got brought back for a second project, but like they didn't like that answer.
Yes, and sometimes they don't, and that's
Yeah,
fine,
they didn't like that
right?
answer. But yeah, I mean, it's that's always been, for me, it's like it's those kinds of things that I find the most interesting, and I don't necessarily want to be, a class. I definitely don't want to be a classic management consultant, um, because I see the harm that they do.
Right.
Not all management consultants, but many of them. But I feel like often it's the what am I trying to say? It's the I'm going to lean on a metaphor. You go to a mechanic, there's a knocking in my engine. Great, we can fix that, but here's your real problem, kind of stuff.
Right.
But not trying to upsell them on anything. And I find that stuff to be just fascinating. It's really just that how people work together stuff that
Yeah.
really makes me interested in trying to make things more efficient and effective. But yeah, anyway,
Yeah, like
just as
you're essentially acknowledging the complexity in the machine, right? Whatever the
mm-hmm,
machine is, and you're acknowledging that things are interconnected, right? And you're acknowledging that the solution is not trivial. It's not like you take the screwdriver, right? To go back to your mechanic,
yeah,
metaphor, right? And you don't take the screwdriver and start screwing and unscrewing screws and just being like, I'm done, right? Like you need to diagnose,
yeah,
you need to understand, you need to, yeah. And I think that is the true nature of design, right? It's spending that time up front to understand and giving yourself and the sort of the team around you that are not just designers, hopefully, right?
mm-hmm,
To come up together with a solution that satisfies everybody's positive outcome, like some level of positive outcome for as many people involved, right? Because I feel like we could have a great positive outcome from the perspective of the designer in me, but maybe the policy person sees that as, oh my god, like to change the policy, like the legal framework around this to do what you designers think is the ideal state, right? And even
right,
though it sounds great on paper, to get there it will take 17 years and how many court dates and whatever,
right.
right? So,
And do you
so
realize how many senators will have to buy to get this done? Like, come on, it's just not in the
yeah,
budget.
but it's you just throw some fentanyl in there.
Okay,
That's how you
fair.
do it.
That's fair.
Yeah,
That's fair.
yeah,
Just a little zhuzh it up. I get it.
yeah.
Yeah, I think the thing that I have found challenging over the past couple of years, setting aside the wackiness of the market, I'll say over the past 7 months, um,
7 months?
is
Where did you live the previous year and a half?
oh well, yeah, it's yeah, fair point. Past 2 years. How about the past 5 years?
Yeah,
Past dang it, how since 1973. Not that's too far back. Yeah, there was I say 7 months because there was some hope slash tradition where once an election is done, people get easier with spending money to get shit done, and especially when it's close to the end of a year and they've got things that they have to ship by the end of the year that they've made promises to stakeholders or whatever, that they open up the checkbook and start getting stuff done. And that didn't happen this time. And it has only gotten worse. And I'm finding that for the most part, the appetite seems to be, I just need you to fix this little thing, right? And I know that the bigger thing is broken, but I can't and or won't do anything about that because it is just not, it's not, there's no motivation to do it, right?
okay.
Motivation is not the right word. It's close though. Just blanking on a word. This is happening more and
Discipline?
more. Mm. It's more like, it's more like when, maybe it is motivation. It's like when somebody is, like the reason that they do something. Like I'm not being
Yeah,
asked to fix this, so I'm not going to fix it, right? Even
right.
though I know it needs fixing. I'm not being I'm not being monetarily rewarded to do so, so
Right.
forget it.
Yeah,
And I may
yeah,
even be punished for doing something. Um,
yeah. I mean,
but I feel like that shift has happened over the past couple of years, and where it's made it harder for me to figure out how to say what I do because I don't necessarily want to be doing that production level work all the time.
yeah.
Even though I know it's necessary to do sometimes, but like I want to figure out these stickier situations, but the appetite seems less there, and I'm wondering if like you in Canada are seeing
The
anything
the
different.
51st state. I live in
The
the
51st
capital.
state. That's
Yeah. Um, so I've I'm English is not my first language, if that's not obvious to your viewers slash listeners. So I don't consider myself the most eloquent person in the room or the best salesman in the room or the most articulate person in the room at the best of times, right? So what I've learned in the last 10 years is talking to people about what I can do for them does more harm than letting people assume what I can do for them and then, then course correcting that perception, right?
mm,
So sometimes I'll be brought in to do, let's say, a service blueprint, right? Like somebody's just trying to redesign a service, right? We're not talking about like any sort of systemic lens to it in the brief, right? It's like we need a experienced service designer to come in and kind of help us put a team together or lead a team or right to redesign the service. And I could say, can we take a step back and look at like the portfolio of services that your organization is providing, right, and the value that you're getting out of those and the types, right, how many are transactional and how many they're relational and the cost of those services, and try to put together a strategy about which service we should improve. I don't do any like I could do that, but I feel like, okay, so can I help improve a service? I hope so, right? Like it depends on
mm,
the team, that whether I have access to the right people, whether I can kind of go through the stages of sort of how I
mm,
perceive a service redesign process. But a lot of times as I go through that, and people kind of see some of the things that I do, and then some of the things that I allude to rather than propose, but just allude to, right? Like, and we eventually get to, a more systemic lens applied to that service redesign. It's less of a service redesign, and it's more like a service portfolio, review, and maybe that was not the right service to be redesigned, to your point earlier, right? Like maybe that wasn't the right problem to solve, right? But I've learned that not fighting it early on with words, especially since, again, I'm not the most articulate person in the room. At least I never feel like I'm articulate enough given the things that are going through my head, or things are going through my head way too fast for me to stop them and spit them out. But that has helped, right? So I know people like to hear themselves talk a lot, particularly in meetings and in front of bigwigs, right, and hippos. But I kind of feel like just kind of taking a step back and hearing what they expect, like kind of like what their point of view is in terms of how I can help them. And then if it's something that like a worst case scenario is what they're saying, can I live with that, right? And in some cases, like, can I redesign the service? Sure, right? But I know that if that is the sort of the worst case scenario, right? I can view some different futures in which the best case scenario is truly what I love to do, not just
mm,
at that level of scale, right? So I find that it's less about me selling myself directly and me more like getting the space to observe and kind of work with the team to diagnose differently, right? And
right.
um, that's not to say that like all like this works 100% of the time or 75% of the time or anything like that, right? Because we
Yeah.
all make it sound like when we're on social media or on some of these things, we all make it sound like we're all batting 1,000, we're all Shohei Otani of service design, right? But that's not the case, right? Like there are
Shit, we're
some,
supposed to be doing that? All right, I gotta
yeah,
start doing that then.
yeah. Well, it's TikTok, man. If you're not on TikTok, you don't exist.
That's true. That's
Yeah.
true.
I
Yeah,
don't
I'm a
I don't even
figment of
know
my
the
own
URL of
imagination.
TikTok.
I don't even know what it is.
Yeah.
Is it an acronym? No, I'm just kidding. Um,
It's two
you
brothers.
were it's to tick and talk.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Perfect. That's enough for me to work with. Um, you were explaining that, and I think I had like an honest to goodness epiphany. Uh, like like it
An,
was
an
a good
electric
thing.
epiphany.
An E epiphany,
Yeah,
yes, an
yeah,
E
okay.
epiphany, E hyphen epiphany, however you spell epiphany. Where maybe it wasn't the kind of thing where it was a good thing that I was sitting down, but like it really just kind of went boom in my brain. I'm going to go back to my box metaphor. I think there's a little bit. It's probably arrogance. Um, that I've spent the past 26 years building this large, amorphous, well lit box, you know, trading up, trading up, trading up. And not literally this, but just I'll use this to get the idea out. Is I don't want to then. It's almost like I'm downgrading. Like I'm in business class for in an international flight. Like why would I ever go back, right? But seriously, why would I? Everyone should fly business class and nothing else. It should be what everybody gets. Um, but why would I go back to a smaller box? And I think that you just articulated why you go back to a smaller box. Like to, I'm
Because
putting my metaphor
that
on your
smaller
metaphor, but
box may be
yeah,
part of a much bigger box
that's
than your
correct.
box.
That's absolutely
Yeah,
correct. And
yeah,
and I think sometimes I self-select out
yeah,
earlier in the process than I should because I think, oh, you want some usability testing.
yeah,
I know that sure we might be able to find something, but you're shipping when and you want testing now.
yeah.
Like why you're not going to fix it? Why would I help? Like why would I get involved with that? And it's because I'm still like I still think in these terms of like I want to be helpful, right? And I think that I forget that it's like maybe I can be just minorly helpful right now and it opens the opportunity to be more helpful
Yeah,
later on.
but even to that example, right? Like, yes, you can do usability testing, and yes, they don't have enough time, let's say, to fix whatever you're finding, right? But so you know it's gonna fail, right? Like you know this in the if I had a dollar every time I told my immediate counterparts that like there's no way this is gonna happen the way you think, and there's no way you're gonna finish this on
Yeah,
time, and there's no way people are gonna use what you're creating, right? Like I'd be rich. But
yeah,
aside from that, if you know that's happening, right, and you can, you can be like, hey, I told you so, right? Like it's like you guys put me on this project. Remember, I protested mildly, right? I said,
mm-hmm.
you may be doing the wrong thing, but I'll help you, right? Just to show you that, like. And along the way, I will tell you some things that you could have done better, right? Then after that failure happens, whether it's in 3 months or 6 months or whatever, right? And they see some of the things that you've highlighted kind of coming to fruition, right? Guess who they're going to go back to help them truly think
Yeah,
through another version of that, right? You're going to be the person that doesn't need training in that, right? Or needs just to kind of just a refresher of stuff that you've done 3 to 6 months ago, right? You've already correctly diagnosed, hopefully, some of the issues that are with that, you know service redesign, product redesign, testing of a feature, whatever it is that you were doing, right? So you're already like you're skipping so many interview phases, right? Because you're the right person,
right. Yeah, yeah,
you're the only person that organization is thinking about when it's doing this, right? So
yeah,
that's what I'm saying. Like the small box, like the box is just a metaphor, right? It's everything is exposed to everything. It's just a whether you can break out of the perception of the size of the box, and whether that perception in the eyes of your client organization, right? If they get to the same realization as you have early on, right? And you have to give them time to get there, right? You're not going to, I've learned a long time ago that you're not going to change the mind of somebody through just a single conversation, right? Like
yeah.
if somebody has a perspective and they think they're right,
Oh yeah, yeah.
one
That's
hour conversation, it's never going to be like they might nod and they might agree with you and they might say, great, thank you. And then, you're out the door, right? But if you say, no, you know what, like, let me try to help you, right? Let me try to help you. If you see, like you said, you see some, like, you see how things are potentially mispositioned, but you also see some ways in which you can improve that positioning, right? If it's just
Yeah,
badly positioned and there's no way out of it, then by all means get the hell out of there as fast as you can, right? But in my experience, it's rarely that way, right? And
yeah,
I also like to, probably very wrongly, I like to think that, like, the people that I know and that I work with before, right, which is a lot of my kind of business, right, uh, are a certain type of person where, like, they're more open-minded to design kung fu, right, like whatever that is. And and that takes, again, a lot of time spent in the industry, a lot of experience, a lot of, which you have, right? Like, you've been
hmm,
around
a
for
little
just
while.
as long as I
As
have.
long as you, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think my takeaway from this conversation, Cornelius, is that there is no box except for the boxes we make along the way. All right, let's switch gears.
Okay.
It's time for seven plus or minus two questions.
Whoa. I'm not good at math, so you're
That's
gonna.
that's why I'm giving you a range of anywhere from
Okay.
9 to 5 or 5 to 9, depending on how you look at that. Um,
59 it is.
exactly. 59 questions starting now. There's no guardrails or barriers for any of these questions.
Okay.
However, you want to interpret the question to give an answer. And
Oh,
if you
you're
don't want
gonna
to give an answer,
regret
that's
this
fine.
so
No,
badly.
no, no. So far, I've only regretted it. Never. It's always
Okay.
been awesome. Um, I mean, it's always been at least mediocre.
Oh, well.
Too
I can
awesome. Like the
promise you
the
it will
the
be
floor is
mediocre.
mediocre.
Okay.
The floor is mediocre, but it's almost the average is awesome. We'll say that.
Okay.
All right. So, question one: what's something that you did recently that went really well?
Something that I did recently that went really well. Um, like, I guess professionally speaking.
No guardrails. No limitations.
Oh, well, I mean,
Whatever comes to mind.
to me, tangible stuff that goes really well is, like, just kind of, things around the house, like, building a deck, that kind of stuff. Like, to me, because I don't have the expertise, right? Like, to me, doing a really cool design project in which, like, I have, almost 30 years experience doing this kind of stuff, right? Is like, well, it's not a surprise if it goes well, right? Like, I would like to hope that I haven't stuck around in this discipline for 20
Right.
years and to
Yeah.
30 years, whatever, and not have any clue of what I'm doing. But when I build a deck, I have never built a deck before, right? Like, I have never worked with carpentry, right? Like, I am not like, I don't consider myself a handyman in any way, right? So, like, when you put a deck together and it holds and it's kind of, it's gone through a couple of seasons now and everything's still intact and people are not dying when they're walking on it and that kind of stuff, right? Like, to
Mm-hmm.
me, that is, kind of pushing your horizons and your boundaries and doing something that you haven't done before, and have it mildly competently done, right? I don't know if that's the right word. Like, maybe it's like
Mm.
below average, but survivable, right? Maybe
Right.
that's the
Right.
the level, right? But it looks decent, right? Like, nobody comes to me and says, "Oh yeah, you clearly did this yourself," right? People go like, "Hey, cool, you have a new deck," right? And sometimes they
Right.
ask me like, "Who did you pay? How much did it cost?" Right? And I'm like, "Haha,"
I did it
right?
myself.
Exactly. So those are, to me, like painting a wall, right? Like, I have a 7 foot wall in my place, and sorry, 17-foot wall, and I always kind of bug me the color and whatever, right? And I eventually one day showed up, like, I went to, Home Depot and showed up with like a scaffold, and then, by the time my girlfriend came home, she's like, what the what, right? And like, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I am doing this, right? I have a week with this scaffold thing set up and I'm gonna
Let's
do
go.
it, right?
Yeah.
And then, it after that I'm like, yeah, I should have done this like years ago, right? So those are the kind of things that are kind of outside of my usual professional, endeavors that kind of give
Hmm.
me joy and more so than accomplishments at like like it's design, it's UX design, service design, right? Like that's not gonna that doesn't necessarily move my heart needle, so to speak,
Hmm.
right? It kind of moves
Yeah.
my brain needle quite a bit, right? But it doesn't move my heart needle. The heart needle is a bit different.
See, excellent. What I'm really enjoying about these conversations that I've been having with people is they're normal conversations.
Right.
And sure, we talk about design stuff sometimes, but like it's you and I are sort of roughly improving our way through these conversations. We don't necessarily know where they're going to go, and that's really interesting to me. So that's why, especially for these questions, I don't want to put limitations. So I love your answer. It's a great answer.
Well, thank
Well
you.
done. You passed the first test. All right, next one. What do you wish people cared more about?
Late stage surveillance capitalism. No. Um,
Cared more about as to be more excited about it,
Yeah, yeah,
or
yeah.
more
Like I
resistant to
feel
it?
like, like it's only the rich people that get really excited about it, and we should all get excited. No, no, no. Like let's just not follow that
No, no,
line of
no, no.
questioning.
We don't need that
Uh,
kind of sarcasm.
yeah, I wish so. So this is like a concept that I mean I've heard Alan Cooper talk about first, but it kind of stuck with me for a while, and like it's been probably 10 years or so that I first heard it, but then I kind of embraced it in some ways, right? And that is. I wish people cared more about like being a decent ancestor to future
Hmm.
generations, right? And I also understand that it's really hard to do that in your like 20s and 30s at least, right? Where like you just think that life is never ending and
Yeah.
time horizons are never ending, right? And life is like it always has the best coming up, right? But I think like this concept of being a good ancestor, being a decent ancestor, a decent human being in the context of, humanity and sustainability and leaving the place that you were born in or the planet you were born in at least the same state that you found it, as opposed to like worse or a lot worse than when you found it, right? So like this concept of decent good ancestry for the
Hmm.
next generations. I think I wish it was more ingrained into Western culture, because a lot of the sort of Eastern cultures have this kind of built into their ethos, but uh, I don't see it so much in the Western world, right? So that's one thing I wish people cared more about leaving the place better than when they arrived, or at least in the same state as when they arrived.
All right, next question. What's your go-to dish that you like to share with people?
Man, I'm a terrible, terrible cook. Like I do not like this is see, like this is where it's like it's going downhill. I mean, the only dish
It's
that I
going
can really
downhill.
share with people that like people could even consider a dish is like grilled salmon with some stuff on top that's secret, right? And
Hmm.
that's but it's not that I love to share that with people. It's like it's the only thing that I can make that is shareable with people, because otherwise, like I would need like, to have paramedics, kind of lined up at my door. So that is the really boring answer to your
It's not a
question, but
boring answer at all.
I have no cuisine kung fu whatsoever, right? I know you have worked in a restaurant before,
Mm.
right? And I envy people who know their way and can tell the difference between the different cutlery and knives and things, right? But to me, that is like a different planet. Yeah.
Well, in my opinion, you don't need to know what the different knives are, just as long as it's sharp.
Yeah,
Um,
that helps.
yeah,
Yeah, good for
yeah,
self-defense if the salmon attacks.
that's true. Yeah,
Yeah,
they they can be pretty fishy.
yeah.
Um, Terrible pun. So without revealing your secret spiciness, how do you grill it? Do you do it like on a outdoor grill kind of thing, or how do you cook it?
I like to cook it in the oven. Like
Hmm.
I find that cooking in the oven it gives it like a more uh like I guess what's the word? Like a more stable cooking throughout rather than like I
Hmm.
find that when you cook it on a grill, it's like a lot of times it's like it burns a little on the outside and it's kind of a little too raw for me on the inside. So I like to cook it in an oven and but it's sort of like like I put some like a little bit of butter on it. I put like some hollandaise. I put some feta cheese. I kind of graze it
Hmm.
on top of it, right? And put some dill, right? So it just kind of it takes it takes a bit of a different shape than a typical grilled salmon, right? That's
Hmm.
my only move, right? Like if back when I was young, it was like if I invited somebody to come in for a date and I cook for them, and if that didn't do it, there was no like next
Yeah,
time, right?
yeah,
It was like that's the one, and it's go big or go home or just
yeah.
go somewhere. Yeah. I mean, this will be very, very telling to you, but like I have no idea what the broil button does on my oven. I don't
Okay,
know.
that's fine.
I don't know the difference. Like I click the bake button
Hmm.
because I understand the word bake.
Yeah, yeah.
I do not understand the word broil. Again, English not my first
Do you want to
language.
know? Do you want to know?
Sure. What is the difference? Like
So, yeah,
like for all the listeners out there who expected like some earth-shattering conversation, this is
no, this is
an
awesome.
American teaching an immigrant how to use an oven.
That's right. Ah, I'm colonizing your kitchen.
Yeah,
Um,
please do. I wish you did.
you know what baking is, and here's my take on this: is do you know the comic XKCD?
Yeah.
Yeah. So XKCD 1053. Look it up. This is
Okay.
the I don't make fun of people for not knowing something. It's an opportunity to get excited to share knowledge, right?
Right.
Um, so the bake option, heats up the entire oven.
Yeah.
You tend to wait until it gets up to
Yeah.
160 or 165 or whatever um, Celsius. And I was doing Celsius for you.
Yeah.
So
Great. My
yeah,
my oven
yeah.
is in Fahrenheit, so like I know
Okay,
450.
350.
Oh,
450.
350.
What?
Okay.
Yeah, whatever. Most ovens default to like 165 Celsius, 350
Yeah, it
Fahrenheit,
defaults to
something like that.
350. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and so you wait for the whole oven to heat up. The broiling, like if you get down and look on the sort of the roof of the, I don't know why I'm doing this physically, but because I'm an actor. Uh, More than likely on your oven there'll be this on the roof of the oven there'll be this ribbon of a metal strip,
Okay.
and if you turn the broil on, that's going to light up hot orange within, I don't know, 20 seconds, maybe
Okay.
30 seconds.
So just the top?
It's just the top,
Okay.
and it basically is just shoving heat straight down.
Okay.
And almost always, whatever you're broiling, you're using on um, the first or the second, where the rack slides in,
Yeah.
the topmost one.
Yeah.
I do mine on the second one down because I'm broiling it for about 9 minutes or so.
Okay.
Um, I usually preheat my oven on bake first, and then I switch over to broil, just
Okay.
so it's a very even temperature in there.
Yeah.
But it's 9 minutes, it's done.
Okay. And you don't have to
It's a
flip
little,
it?
Don't flip
Whatever
it at
you're
all.
doing.
Don't touch
Okay.
it. Don't
Okay.
even open the thing.
Okay.
You just wait 9 minutes. It's done. Don't for salmon. Excuse me. Don't put it on the top one because it will burn.
Burn it. Yeah.
Yeah, but it gives it like a nice little crispy crust to it. It's still
Okay.
juicy on the inside.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, so that's what the broil does. Is it
Amazing.
lights up that top thing there.
Yeah, ding ding. I feel like this was a useful,
See,
you know,
if nothing else, good night,
conversation.
everybody.
I have
Right?
learned something
Yeah,
today.
yeah,
I can tell all my immigrant friends what my
yeah.
what that button does.
But don't tell them I told you. You go in as the expert, so
Oh
they look at
yeah?
you as
No,
the
no.
go-to.
I cannot pretend I'm an,
Just
like expert anywhere in that kitchen area thing. Sorry.
it'll be fine. Yeah, give it a try sometime.
I will.
All right, next question. Next question. Um, if there is any, what is the business value of empathy?
Whoa. What is the business value of empathy? I think so doing business is an activity, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's not the most, I guess, commendable activity that a human can do, right? But it's an activity. So wanting to do activities, right? Not just business, but business is the context that you've set with people that are interested in understanding the world for more than their own perspective, whether that's you or whether that's the people you work with, is always going to make that activity more enjoyable for everybody, right? Like, I'm not saying necessarily there is a intrinsic business value or a monetary business value to it, right? But I think there's an increased pleasure to work with aspect that in more often than not is going to translate into better outcomes and feeling better about the business activity that you're doing. I don't know if that makes any sense, but
No, I
that's
follow you.
kind of how
Yeah.
I feel about it, right? I I I I I never like to lead with, I'm the chief empathy officer in this project, right? Like, I don't like, when people say, like, well, what designers do? Well, we empathize, right? It's like everybody empathizes, right? Maybe they don't articulate it as empathy. Maybe they don't, maybe they're not the most empathic person in the world, but to some level, unless you're a serial killer, and I mean, not that I know any serial killers, at least not out,
Right.
like,
But
people who,
academically,
but
yeah.
academically speaking, I feel like you feel better about the process, you feel better potentially about the outcomes, and you feel better in retrospect about the time that you put into that business activity. And whether there is a business value, like whether that constitutes business value as you pose the question, I don't know. It's like, define business value, right? To me, business, like, it makes it for a more pleasurable activity to be a part of, which to me is more valuable than an activity that is not very pleasurable to take a part of,
Mm.
if that makes
Okay.
any sense whatsoever. I don't know.
I think it does. All right. Next question. Waving at flaggers. See or no?
What's a flagger?
There we go. All right. So, if there's road work
Right.
and there's someone like with either a flag who's
Oh,
telling you to stop or
definitely
they've got a
waving. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Like, they're
Yeah.
they're there. Like, I mean, I feel for those guys. I live in Canada, right? So, like, especially in the winter when it's -40 outside, right? And like, their job is to make sure that you don't run other people, uh, you know, with your car, or you don't end up in a ditch somewhere, right? Like, I feel like they're doing a really positive thing for the project, right? and yeah, like it's the human. Like I also think that, like, when you're cutting somebody off, or like when you're merging, when you're doing the zipper, the intersection or whatever, when you cut in front of somebody, you should always like just raise your hand and say thank you. And like that person is probably mad at you because you've just done that, right? But you're acknowledging, right? You're like just saying, hey, like my bad, right? Like I know I just cut off, but thank you for not like ramming into me from behind, or like honking at me for the next 4 miles, right? Like I feel
Yeah.
like there is a like I come from Eastern Europe, so I come from Transylvania, so like we don't have that in our culture in any way. Like Eastern European culture is like very like you just like don't smile, you just tell people the truth, exactly how you feel, right? Like there's no like pleasantry to it. But I feel like waving, like Canada broke me down. Like,
Mm.
you know, I feel like that's part of who I am, and I appreciate it. Like when I let somebody kind of cut in front of me in line, or when I stop an intersection to let somebody cross, and they just like acknowledge, I feel like, hey, we are
Oh
humanity, like
yeah.
yay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm actually really glad that you're the first person that I've asked this question to, because of your Eastern European and Canada perspective on it.
Okay.
Um, and I love the sentence "Canada
Canadians are
broke me."
probably like, this is the least Canadian person I have ever met, and like somehow he's speaking for Canadians.
Yeah, go with it. Go
Yeah.
with it. Yeah, they're not on the
Yeah.
show right now,
Yeah,
so
elbows up.
you're the
Uh,
yeah elbows up. All right. So last question.
oh, question number 59.
59, the 59th question. Imagine it is a year from now. What do you hope to not be carrying anymore?
Oh, a laptop for every client that I have. So like,
Ooh,
so
yeah.
this is a very like, consultancy kind of straight answer, right? Like there's no metaphors, there's no nothing. Like at a time I work with three, like at this particular time right now I work with three clients, right? I'm doing three projects at the same time. And uh, each client, they have fairly high security, or profiles as organizations, and they all like I can only work on their laptop. So it's very common for me. Like this morning, I left the house with three laptops, three chargers, because of course one of them is a Mac, one of them is a Windows machine, and then one of them is a
Yeah.
Surface, like another Windows machine, I guess, but not I cannot share the power
Right.
cord. Um, One of them doesn't allow me to connect any peripherals that are not the organization's peripherals, to the point of like I get automatic phone calls that like like there's the special forces parachuting over my place. Like no, no, but like I get a phone call from somebody, right? Like I sometimes plug in my phone to charge it by mistake, my personal phone, and then it's like, what did you do, right? Like,
Right. Yeah.
so I would love to not have to carry a laptop for every client I have at the same time, ideally. That, like, a world where people would just be like, bring your own laptop, work on whatever machine you want. Like, it doesn't matter, that's what I would like to not carry. But,
I
not
I
very
think I think
philosophical.
there's a isn't there like a Beatles song? Imagine just one laptop.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
I
That's
think
that's a
that
good song.
that's a big hit. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's.
it's something like that. It's
Yeah.
probably something like that. I might be misremembering it, but
Yeah, it goes ooh ooh ooh. Ooh. No.
yes, that
Yeah,
one.
that
Yeah,
one. Yeah,
terrible. All right, let's stop talking.
yeah. Let's stop talking, and I hope you get 5 minutes of decent material out of this. And if not, then please don't post it.